Coming up next on the Voice of Alabama Politics, more bad news on the budget crisis. Also, the V-Team takes a look at the Attorney General's new hire. And Speaker Mike Hubbard is trying to run the State House from the Lee County Courthouse. What's next, Mike? You gonna try to run it from the big house? All this and much, much more coming up next on The V.
The Voice of Alabama Politics, with your host, Bill Britt, and the V-Team with Claire Austin, Susan Britt, Jack Campbell, Baron Coleman, Charlana Spencer, and special reports with Jonathan Barbie. Now, the #1 political show in Alabama, The V.
Welcome to the Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by the V-Team. Welcome all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This past week, Governor Robert Bentley asked every state agency to give a down and dirty assessment of what would happen if the budget proposed by Senator Orr and Representative Klaus were to pass. It is a virtual doomsday, isn't it, Susan?
It is.
You've got some numbers. What are the numbers?
What they reported out was that as far as military and veterans go, we'd have lay off 25 Army National Guard, close 25 Army National Guard armories, dismiss 1,625 National Guard soldiers, 170 National Guard airmen. In law enforcement, we'd lose 132 law enforcement officers. Corrections, we have to close 2 facilities, which would shift 2,000 prisoners back into an overcrowded system. Then you get down to where you've got senior services, heavily affected mental health, Medicaid, TANF dollars, children, $320 million cuts in Medicaid program. It's going to affect the court system, and of course, the favorite topic lately, 15 out of 22 of the state parks will close.
I mean, Claire, you know, this sounds like a doomsday scenario, but over at the State House, it isn't scaring them a bit, is it?
I mean, you know, it is. They've put that out there to try to put pressure on these members of the legislative system to say, hey, we'll pass some of this tax increase. That's not going to happen. The caucuses have caucused a lot throughout this past week. They're not looking at any kind of taxes. I think some of them have talked about let's doing some earmarking. They're just flaming the fire. And, you know, it's all over the radio, all across the state of Alabama, but I don't think it's penetrating with the elected officials.
You know, Jack, one of the things here that really shocked me is that you would have some 30,000 children lose their benefits. I mean, their food benefits.
I mean, it's just unconscionable. And on top of that, we have no mental health program in Alabama anymore. I mean, the money's just evaporated. At some point, the citizens are going to be in a revolt. I mean, these guys promised in the 2010 election, which brought so many new faces to the legislature, they were going to be different. And they haven't. They've disappointed us. You know, closing state parks, you know, people don't think it's a big deal. It is a big deal. Tourism is a very important industry to Alabama. And if I'm Governor Bentley and I go down to the Florala community and speak to the Rotary Club and say, this is why your park's going to close, it's going to make big news. And then, you know what? They're not going to blame Governor Bentley. They're going to blame the guys who fund these programs.
The problem is, though, Susan, is that in politics, you don't want to be the Republican who raised taxes, right?
Absolutely, at least in this state. They would rather take the hit for closing a state park than they would to have it on their record that they raised taxes, because they believe that the voter in 4 years is going to kind of, forget it, it's going to get gray, but the taxes won't.
Well, it already looks like they're backing down on the parks anyway, right, Claire?
Well,
I mean, pretty much.
In reality, all this fear factor of everything that's been laid out, they're really not going to shut these things down in the bitter end. They're going to find some way to rob Peter and pay Paul and pull money from some different entity. I'm not sure yet whether it's education fund or just unearmarking funds or something. Nobody's going to take the stance to really stand up and do what they really need to do.
This is the same thing that the Democrats were criticized for doing, right, Jack?
Right, and you know, this is the first year of the quadrennium. The same time when they passed that pay increase for legislators. Well, guess what? 3 years later, I don't think any of them lost on that issue.
No.
They may have
No.
lost on Common Core or a couple of other things. This would be the time to do it if you're going to raise taxes.
Yeah.
Right, give it the first year, because that's normally always the honeymoon year, and but 3 years down the road, they forget about it.
And I've looked at Bentley's proposal. It really doesn't punish families, elderly, children, or working folks.
No.
It goes after some corporate loopholes and some other ways, a couple of sin taxes, but
Yeah.
it's not
it really,
that bad.
It's not about people. It's about big business for the most part. You know, one of the things that,
If all, yeah.
Go ahead, Claire.
No. I'm just saying, if they all decided, okay, let's stand up, let's do the right thing, and they do it all across the board, and every one of them support it, then they've done the right things for the citizens.
yeah. Well, it's not policy, it's politics, right?
Right.
One of the things that we looked at again this week is they passed a bill out of committee that says they will postpone for another year paying back the gas and oil trust fund. Now, we were told that they were going to pay that back, and Governor Bentley said it's the most responsible thing that a conservative do is pay their bills, but they're not going to pay it back this year. They're skipping a payment.
Well, they don't have the money to do it. I mean, you're right. They borrowed this oil and gas money from the trust fund a couple of years ago, and it's just been looming out there, payments. But they don't have, if we can't fix the hole in the budget, they certainly can't pay back oil and gas. Now, I'm not saying I'm 100% for that, but I think legitimately, Representative Klaus is probably doing the right thing. Let's just buy us another year and let them pay back.
Jack, can you call up Regions Bank and put your payments off for another year?
I don't think that would take too kindly.
I want a bill that says I don't have to pay any of my debts for a year.
Well,
It'd be nice to get one of those.
This is only $30 million fix. I mean, we got a $300 million hole. We're still 270 out.
Right. You know, the problem is, and I think that the governor got serious about this issue during the campaign, but didn't make an issue out of it, so they started beating him up. He's seriously putting a proposal together, and yet they're spinning it where the governor's looking bad, not the legislators, right?
That's absolutely correct. And it's interesting enough, last week I had somebody from out of state who lived here at one time, said she was traveling from Georgia to Alabama, Mississippi, and said all throughout the state, all she heard was them lambasting on radio stations the governor and trying to put the blame on him. Said it was unreal. No, and you know, if you're a part of this process, you know that it's really not the governor that has the vote in the legislative process.
Right.
It's the House and the Senate.
Right.
He's just trying to stand up and fix the issue and the whole, trying to do the right thing.
I mean, some of those idiots on talk radio, not you and Barron, y'all are.
But it's a stage.
not
It's a
always.
staged plan war.
Yeah.
Outside, hidden, hired guns that are working for somebody in
They're
the legislature.
calling Robert Bentley Obama and Bentley. I mean, doesn't that outrage you?
It does make me very mad.
Excuse me,
because-
that's egregious.
Yeah,
It is.
I mean,
It
that really
absolutely
is.
is. It
I mean,
absolutely is.
How is it, Susan, they call a good conservative Christian like Bentley Obama and Bentley?
Because that's the only cry they have, and regardless of what the crisis is Obama, Obama, Obama. We
You know,
saw it
it's-
through the elections. We
When you
see
don't
it
have
every
your
day.
own plan, you blame everybody
Yeah, that's
else's.
right.
You know, they don't have a plan.
Plus, this also, remember, this is a coordinated effort toward October.
Yeah, I was going to say, this dovetails. It isn't just because we're in the legislature. This is a organized, synchronized, long-term PR plan to try to drive Governor Bentley's negatives up,
Yeah.
where he has a high negatives by the fall.
It just
Well-
so happened he gave them a perfect tool to do it
Somebody
with.
the other week said that we had a Bentley love fest. I respect Governor Bentley. I think he's doing a fine job. I wish we had more Bentleys in the legislature, don't y'all?
Yes, we had him on our radio show, and he did a great job.
All right,
And-
we're going to leave it right there. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with more news and analysis.
The V is sponsored by Spot On Strategies Group.
In 1977, an 8-year-old boy picked up the game of golf from his father. The odds of that same boy then making it to the US and European Pro Golf Tours, 1 in 7 million. The odds of the Big Easy winning the US Open twice, 1 in 1.2 billion. The odds of him having a child diagnosed with autism, 1 in 88. Ernie Els encourages you to learn the signs of autism.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. This past Monday, Jack, the United States Supreme Court threw the North Carolina redistricting case back to the courts down there. The courts had said that redistricting was fine. The Supreme Court said, no, 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 you based it on race. You cannot do that. And then they cited the Alabama case. And this has caused court watchers to say this is the sign that they want Alabama's districts redrawn.
We went through this in 1982. Plan was thrown out. 83, we had all new special elections for legislative seats. I'd hate to see that again because it's costly, it's tumultuous, but it could happen. And if these guys, when they're drawing these districts, were not so into self-preservation that they actually tried to draw fair lines, right, this could have been avoided.
Well, Claire, I mean, you know, some of our legislators said, oh, this is all a technicality, but this North Carolina ruling seems to say that the Supreme Court thinks it's more than a technicality.
Right, they do, and I think it's in the minority districts, and I think there's been a lot of chit-chat and gathering and meeting behind closed doors meetings trying to see what they can do this past week up there at the legislature in redistricting to help take care of some of the minority districts only, because they want to just handle that. But I believe that I think they dropped a bill in on Thursday about redistricting. Well,
Susan, how do you move one district and not move the other ones? I mean, that's very difficult to do, isn't it?
I would think so. If you move, you know, based on the way they calculate this, if you move 5 seats in one, you can't just invent 5 people in another district.
Well, it's going to be interesting, and I think one of the things that we're hearing is that they want to make a deal with the Black Caucus.
Right.
Joe Reed is not interested in making a deal. So they want to slow walk this process, Jack, so that they do not end up with a special election that coincides with the 2016 presidential election.
Well, presidential elections are in March and regular primaries are in June. Now, what could happen is if they rule between now and, say, September of this year, Bentley could call it for March 15th. That would throw a monkey wrench into their plans, I'm pretty sure.
You know, the bottom line, this is a mess, and it's going to be a very expensive mess. Yeah. Like you say, if they had just thought this out a little better.
Well, it's kind of like some of these harebrained bills they passed, like Beeson's immigration bill. I mean, we all knew parts of that were unconstitutional.
Right.
And when they pass these bills in the name of preserving family values or grandstanding on issues, they don't think that later on this is going to cost us money in the court defending.
Right. Well, they've done that for years.
Dare defend our rights means to dare defend our rights in court and pay enormous legal fees.
Meanwhile, we have a deficit in the budget. I just keep saying that.
Yeah, an interesting thing that came up this week, and I know, Claire, you were there for some of this, is that Bobby Singleton got the medical marijuana bill out of committee by the skin of his teeth. But this thing has just gone national, that people are like, you think you could have medical marijuana in Alabama? I mean, it's been pretty amazing, hasn't it?
It has, and there was a lot of, national media and a lot of media up there this past week. And, hey, we've got a deficit. If they're going to legalize it, let's legalize it and tax it and get a little revenue off of it.
Yeah, we could have the Alabama Billy Bong.
We're talking about medical marijuana here, not just anybody.
Not recreational use.
Right.
But if you look and study that issue in the states where they have legalized marijuana, the recreational use of it goes down, and you don't have all these, people getting caught in trafficking drugs and that sort of thing. It's gone down in all the states.
But it's been a boon to their economies
as well.
Amen.
Yeah, we generate some tax revenue off of it.
And I don't have any experience with medical marijuana, and I don't really have any experience with, recreational marijuana.
Yeah, me either.
I do know that, there are studies and there are people that say it helps folks that have glaucoma, that people that have cancer treatment, people that have AIDS, people that have dire disease, there are benefits to it.
That's right. There's been plenty of studies that have proven
It's even been shown to improve cancer patients as far as combating the cancer that they're fighting.
Not to mention everybody's attitude.
Yeah, well, but you know, Jack, I think it was 1973, Jimmy Carter was getting ready to decriminalize marijuana, and somebody convinced him that it was a gateway drug. I always thought, at least for me, my gateway drug was my dad's scotch.
Yeah.
I mean, how do we address this gateway drug? I mean, it really is that's kind of where we're at.
I think people are softening to it.
I think they are. They see, you know, when you see, especially the medical part of it, because when you meet a parent of a child who has epilepsy so severely that they have, you know, 20, 30 seizures a day, severe seizures, and you can't walk away and say, well, I'm not going to let you have that because it's going to make you better.
You know,
because they did some test pilots for that, and the year before, you know, they had parents and children that came down there, and if it really is for medical uses, I don't see anything wrong with that.
You know, Alabama is the #1 state in prescription drugs. The people in Alabama take more Loratab than any other state in the union. Jack, we are #1 in Loratab and 47th in education. Explain that to me.
That's why we're number 47 in education.
I did not know that about the Loratab. That's scary, quite frankly.
It's true. I got that from the insurance folks. We are #1 in Loratab use. I mean, we're stoned. We're just prescription stoned.
Well, I guess that's why they have all these.
So maybe it's really not Kool-Aid they're drinking up there. Maybe they're taking a bunch of pills.
Well, it's very sad that we have that many people on prescription drugs, but I do think
crazy.
I do think that it is a serious epidemic. I have seen it in my community where I live with women, and it's very scary.
Well, and you know, you bring up a good point. We'll stay on this for the duration here. There are so many people these days that are addicted to these prescription painkillers that it's frightening. I mean, it's an epidemic. It really is.
And has been for quite some time.
And, you know, I've known a lot of people that have gone off to treatment because of that, and
absolutely,
it's hard to kick.
Yeah,
it's it's not like, well, you know, it depends on the individual, but it's not like cocaine. I mean, you become physically and mentally addicted to these pills.
Well, and they're so ubiquitous, and people don't think there's any harm in them because the doctor gave them.
The doctor writes a script for, you know, Doc, I have a little stress going on, or, you know, a pain in my back, and they'll just write your prescription.
You know what? I've known several potheads, and I've known some people that smoke pot just on a casual basis, and I've never known one of them to go into rehab for it.
Well, I have a friend that's been smoking pot every day since high school, and I doubt he'd even take an aspirin. He doesn't need it.
Well, you know,
the point you're making is prescription pills are very dangerous. Whether they're teenagers, adults, whatever, and it is a serious epidemic throughout this country.
Well, I have to tell one story on Susan. She took a half a Loratab one time and sat in the chair and cried because she felt so bad.
I just, for the life of me, I don't see what they're getting out of this.
Well, you should have taken the other half, Susan.
Maybe that's the problem.
Well, anyway, we're going to have to leave it right there. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We're going to be right back with some more interesting stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. Big news at the Attorney General's office this week. Alice Martin, former Attorney General, U.S. Attorney General for the Northern District, has taken over as Luther Strange's #2. Claire, you know this woman. What's your opinion?
I think it's fantastic. I'm excited for her. I'm glad, excited for Luther and everybody that works in the Attorney General's office. She's a real lawyer. She's a real person that's going to follow the rule of law. She's like the Iron Curtain. She's going to do the right thing. She's not going to be beholden to anyone other than following the rule of law. She is. She's had a stellar career, and I'm just thrilled to call her my friend, and I'm so glad Luther has put her in there. And so the thugs and the thieves in the state better watch out.
I said they need to start sleeping with the lights on, I guess. But Susan, you've looked at some of her career. She has some real accomplishments here.
2004, she was in the top 10 prosecutors in the nation. And 2006, 2007, just the Northern District of Alabama was number 3 in prosecuting public corruption. We're talking about being behind Chicago, New Jersey, Miami. You know,
Yeah,
that's some
I mean,
pretty
they were
impressive stuff.
prosecuting more public corruption than New Jersey. I mean, imagine that.
Well, that's why as soon as the current president got elected, Alice Martin was one of the first U.S. attorneys he got rid of because he wanted to stop that.
Yeah. They dismantled that white collar crime unit that was started under Alice Martin and ran by Matt Hart.
Well, I think what you have now is that if she's working on this case, you're going to have the gruesome twosome to contend with, and hopefully we'll see justice done soon. Just a few months down the road.
Well,
but she does. She has impeccable credentials.
Right.
You know, we hear, Susan, she's tangled with Mark White before, and it didn't go as well as Mark White had thought it should.
No, it didn't. And I believe at one point he actually threatened her that when she got off the bench, he would make sure that she never worked in the private sector again.
Now,
And
these
I
are
think-
rumors we hear.
Rumors, absolutely, allegedly. But I don't think that's going to go real well for him.
Somebody told me that he spit his Cheerios all down in his lap when he read the news that she was taking over. I don't know if that's true or not.
That's why you need to be very careful about who you threaten and what you do, because you never know if you got to walk across that bridge in life again.
Well, you know, I've met her once, a very impressive woman. It is, I guess this is historic for Alabama. I don't think we've ever had a woman to serve as the chief deputy that I know of.
Well, I think that's true,
And,
but she's a class act, and she will do a fabulous job for the state of Alabama.
Yeah, and you know, for years, the Siegelman people tried to paint her as colluding with Billy Canary and Laura Canary to go after Siegelman. We hear that's all part of the spin machine that they put out there, but people are going to believe what they're going to believe, right, Jack?
Well, when your tail is on the line, you talk about the guys who are after you, and that works for both Democrats and Republicans. So.
And don't think for a minute that, you know, this stirring up of the Billy Canary thing also isn't being heavily used by Hubbard going toward October. I mean, they're really pumping this out there.
Well, they loved her
not
when
true.
she was going after Democrats. Now that they're going after Republicans, they don't like them so much. I mean,
Well, that's why I said it does not matter. She's going to follow the rule of the law, whether you're Republican, Democrat, or independent. She's going to do the right thing.
you know, Claire, you were down at the State House. I know many of us were. All of a sudden, the day after Hubbard appears in Lee County for his motion hearing, appeared in Lee County on the 15th, missed that legislative, well, they had a...
That was committee day.
Committee
that
day. Next day was legislative day, the 16th. They had a big calendar, special order calendar. They met, and at 11:55 or 11:45, Hubbard gavelled it out. We hear two different reasons why he gavelled out the session.
Well, there was a spin story and there was a real story. I was down there working on something, and there were certain caucuses that were mad about a lot of things, in particular bills on the calendar. But the word on the streets all day long down on the fifth floor is, we got to be done by noon. We got to be done by noon. The speaker wants to be done by noon. So the people that were opposed to some things on the calendar, they used that to filibuster. But then we all saw Speaker Hubbard's lawyers floating all around. And so my understanding was he had meetings with his lawyers at the State House during a legislative day.
Susan, you heard from some Republican lawmakers who are a little fed up with that. Yeah,
He burned half a legislative day for his own purposes. We've got lawmakers that come down here to do business, and he's taking time off. Why couldn't he have met with his attorneys on Friday? I mean, really, they're getting very angry. They say he's really letting his defense cross over into his legislative service, and they're getting tired of it.
Well, Jack, I mean, we're under pressure with 23 felony indictments. You're trying to hold a caucus together. You're trying to raise millions of dollars, or at least hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, how can this guy do a good job?
What I wanted to say about Mike is, how is this not a distraction to the legislative process? I mean, no one except a person without a conscience could be walking around putting 100% into their job when they were paying a defense lawyer millions. You've got this wearing on your mind about, am I going to be convicted? Am I going to go to jail? What's this going to do to my family? It has to be a major distraction. But these Republicans who get mad that he's taking time off should have been the guys that said, we want you to step aside and let someone else hold the gavel until you resolve this.
Yeah, well, they didn't
so they have no
the-
one to blame but themselves.
They didn't have the guts to do it, and now they're regretting that they didn't do it. Claire, you know, he's got another hearing coming up next Thursday.
Right.
He's going back down there to try to get his case dismissed again. You know, they've estimated it cost him $45,000 to $50,000 every time he shows up in court. How do they sustain this?
I don't know the real answer to that question. And next Thursday will be a legislative day. Who is he going to trust to take the gavel? That is what the president pro tem is for. So maybe Dr. Gaston will have the gavel. I'm not sure, but I don't know how you sustain continuing to spend all this money and campaign money. And
now, is he allowed to collect money now?
I don't think you can. No, you can't raise money.
He cannot. No, unless he creates his own legal defense fund and he can raise somebody else
now,
can
that's
raise
not
money
public
for
record,
him.
is it? Either?
We don't know of any public defense fund. I mean, it could be going on. I mean, you know, he raised some $300,000, didn't he, Susan? It looked like for his legal defense from Jimmy Rain.
Yes,
This
he
was
did.
back-
And it seems to me like and they were running that through his political PACs. So it seems to me like if there was a defense fund, they certainly wouldn't have wanted to show up on his political
No,
PACs.
you cannot legally do that, but
Well,
you can
I know
have a
that,
legal
but-
defense fund,
Right.
you know, for his legal defense, and then somebody else can call and raise money. He cannot raise that money. Somebody has to do that for him.
Well, for the record, I still think it's a shame, and it's not too late to tell Mike Hubbard to go. We're going to have to leave it right there. You've been watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. You can catch us throughout the state. Just check your local listing and every day on alreporter.com. Thank you for watching, and have a blessed day.